So my Ed Asner story is that I was invited by my lawyer at the time, Charles Silverberg, to a square dance party, like a hoedown kind of thing, which was sort of a nightmare to me. And I ended up like partnered with Ed Asner, and he was kind of annoyed at me because I was really bad at square dancing. So I remember being really embarrassed because, you know, I can't do that kind of stuff for the life of me. Like, which way are we going now? You know, kind of thing. Don't see Joe, you know, and all that. And I was like horrible, and he liked doing it. And so he was kind of irked that it didn't last long. But for one dance, I was partnered up with Ed Asner.
Oh, that's really funny. So he lived out his curmudgeon. You know, he's done
He
these
was curmudgeonly toward me. He was a
he
bit
was,
curmudgeonly.
but he's done these amazing one-man shows that he's been
Oh,
out there
really?
doing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he was on tour around the country when I saw him in Naples. And I think one was about being in the hospital, a friend wrote, and they were great shows, just terrific. And
Really? Huh?
he's a nice man. So we are contemporaries, and I am very jealous of you because you're a pioneer in the sense of being a legend of
Mhm.
a woman comedy writer. And you currently teach as well, right? Are you teaching in California?
Yeah, that's what I'm mainly doing now. I mean, I have a few projects that I'm trying to get off the ground in the, you know, in the cotton fields of show business. You know,
I would,
lift that
I'm a,
concept, tote that proposal.
that's,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm mainly teaching, and I'm teaching at Chapman, which is in Orange County. So I'm actually kind of relieved to be teaching over Zoom because I don't have to get up early and fight traffic to Orange County to teach. I mean, I sort of miss seeing people in person, but I found that since they're small classes of 12 to 14 people, they're like writing workshop classes. It isn't too difficult to do the classes on Zoom, and in some ways creates a kind of intimacy, as I guess you found in your work.
Yes.
That is, you know, that's a plus. There's a downside, and then there's a plus side, and the plus side is that it can sort of create an intimacy, which is what I strive for, is to create the atmosphere of a writer's room, you know, without the stale sandwiches and
Now,
and paper cups.
yeah.
Um, but to have that feeling of kind of community where people are talking about each other's work and contributing to each other's work. And I've been teaching there for over 10 years, I guess. And before
So,
that, I taught at USC, I taught at UCLA, I taught in Northern California at a place called Art, Academy of Art University in San Francisco, where someone was trying very hard to start a TV and film writing program, but unfortunately he died, and everything sort of fell apart after that. So I haven't been teaching there um, because he got uh, pancreatic cancer.
oh, I'm sorry. That's
Died
horrible.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So
My mother had that actually. Um,
yeah, so
yeah.
that was too bad. But I mean, it was also stressful because I'm raising my daughter, who is now perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She's 18 now, and she's going to UCLA. But at the time, my adopted daughter, at the time she was quite young, and I had to fly up in the morning, teach my class, and then fly back that night. So it was kind of stressful. I mean, it
Kind
was
of.
fun in some ways, but you know, but I would just sort of get a lingering glimpse of San Francisco and wish that I could spend time and then have to leave.
Such a beautiful city. Now, I also understand that you taught at the Vancouver Film School.
Yes, I did. A friend of mine is like the head of it, I guess, and he invited me up there, and it was American Thanksgiving, but of course they don't celebrate that in Canada. So it worked out well for me because I was on a break and they weren't. And I went up there and but I mean, I just did a short program. I also was invited to UNC in North Carolina in what you call it. They said it's like the blue spot in the center of the red state in North Carolina. And I was invited there and I taught there I did like a 3-day program there.
Was
And
it Asheville?
when I started was in Toronto.
Now, this is interesting to me. You were from Buffalo, New York.
But not really from in the sense, I mean, that I
Wikipedia
left there
wrong.
at 6 months old. I was born there.
Oh, where did you grow up?
On the East Coast, up and down the Eastern Seaboard.
Were you a sailor?
What?
Were you a sailor?
No, no, I wish, but no, my father, it was kind of like being an army brat in a way. My father had a job tutoring this kid. He had been a private school teacher. My father was born in India, he was British, and he and my mother came to the US from Canada, which is where they met. And they came to the US, and then my father was teaching at various private schools and ultimately ended up at a school in Buffalo. Thus, I was born in Buffalo. But this very wealthy woman offered him a job tutoring her son, who was kind of a problem kid, and with the promise that at the end of it, she would help him to start his own school. And so he was teaching this kid, and they went back and forth between Greenwich and so as a child, we spent the summers in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the winters in Palm Beach. And, you know, they rented houses for us, but they would be different houses. And
well, that's not too shabby.
On the train, we'd go down on the train, you know, it's like a roomette on the train, which I loved. I mean, and I remember that one time there was like circus cars on the train because the circus used to winter in Sarasota, Florida. And Ringling Brothers Circus. There used to be 2 traveling circuses, Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers. And then they merged, and then now the circus is kind of not such a thing because of animal cruelty and all that. But they had to have a special car for the fat lady.
No.
Yes, built to her specifications so that she would fit in it.
It's funny. Well, I certainly enjoy going. We have the Ringling School of Art here in Sarasota now.
Right.
And it's a great school. But I wanted to ask you about your education then. So your dad was a very learned person. What was your mother like?
My mother was very bright too. And in fact, my mother and father homeschooled me until I was in 3rd grade, basically. I went to Palm Beach private school at one point. And it was very frustrating because I already knew how to read. You know, I was reading Alice in Wonderland. I learned to read very early. My mother always said I learned to read in self-defense because everyone in the family was always reading. So I needed to have my own book. So I learned to read, and, you know, I was in 1st grade and they were going like, see, spot, run. And so they decided that I would just help. This is obviously a real mistake in terms of the formation of my character, because the kindergarten teacher, whom I adored, said, all right, well, why don't you just help me with the kindergartners? So that's what I did. And then my mother was teaching me and my sister, my older sister. I have an older sister and a younger brother. There's 7 years between each of us. And so she was teaching her from the Calvert School, correspondence school. And so she was teaching me, and I also would sort of sit in on my sister's lessons. So then when we moved to Millbrook, New York. My
know it well.
quit teaching. Unfortunately, the woman who had promised him his school and everything died suddenly of a heart attack. And she was, you know, only like 40, in her 40s or something, but she was obese, and she died of a heart attack, and he had no course. So at that point, um, we went to Palm Beach, and I went to Palm Beach private school there, and he taught in the school. And then we moved back to the East Coast, to first Highland, New York, and then Millbrook, New York, because my father got a job with IBM. And so in those days, computers were like giant rooms.
Right, right.
And so I remember he showed them to me. I remember him taking me and showing me like the computer room. And so when IBM sold computers to a company, they would send someone with the computers to teach the people in the company how to use them. So my father's job was teaching those people teaching techniques. So he was basically teaching the teachers to teach, as it were.
Yeah.
And Millbrook was the place I lived the longest. We were there for 5 years. And then he was transferred to White Plains, and we moved to Somers, New York.
Wow. So you had a little varied childhood, and
like an army brat, as I said. I was just moving around all the time.
But the love of reading was instilled so early. I was very fortunate too. I got read to a lot, and I was able to read at an early age. But that love of reading was instilled in you. And did your parents have good
My
sense?
parents read aloud to us all the time when we were kids. My mother read us all the little house books. My father was reading the Jungle Book and different things to us. And he actually read Shakespeare plays to us at one point, picking all the parts, the comedies.
Now, did they have good senses of humor, your parents? Were they?
I think that they really appreciated a joke. My father was a big fan of Martin and Lewis, and my mother couldn't stand them. But you know, I've been asked, you know, when did you first realize that you could be funny or whatever? And there were 2 instances. One was an accident, which was when we were living in Greenwich at the movies. There was a newsreel, and I said, piped up, and I was probably, I don't know, 3 or something like that. And I go, "Oh, there's that SOB Truman." Because I thought it was his name.
Right.
I had never heard my father refer to him any other way. And so, and it was mainly, you know, Greenwich, it was a Republican audience. So there was a lot of laughter in the audience. And I was like, oh. And then later in another movie, when I was older, when we were by then living in Millbrook, we went to see a movie called Wagons West, where they were, you know, it was a wagon train, and there was all this drama. And at one point, this woman is giving birth on the wagon train. And I piped up, "Quick, fetch the boiling water." And everyone cracked up, right? And I thought, ha.
That is great. So I wanted to ask you this.
I appreciated the response, and that started me on the path.
That first laugh you got, it's like me with improv. Once I got that first laugh, it certainly does. So did you watch much television? Because as I said,
No.
The contemporaries, and I remember the comedies of the 50s because it was one of my babysitters, and the portrayal of women like My Little Margie. And
you know, I didn't watch television at all, really.
Wow.
We didn't own a television until we got to Millbrook. And then we had a television, but had like rabbit ears and tinfoil, and we could really only bring in one station. And what I remember watching on television at that time was I watched Queen for a Day, which I adored.
I know. I kept asking we were kind of middle class. I kept saying to my mother, "Why don't you go on that show?"
I know. It was really amazing. The sob stories, right? I mean, it was an early version of reality television.
Right.
And then I watched the Loretta Young show.
Yes.
And I think there was some kind of half-hour matinee theater. I watched that. And then my father and I watched quiz shows together.
Wow.
You know, and my father would try to guess the answers ahead of people. But not those sitcom shows because I think they were on channels that we didn't get.
You probably
I mean,
spared
I
a lot.
remember seeing a bit of Father Knows Best, but not, not consistently. And so when I got to Saturday night, taking a big jump, but when I got to Saturday night, it was interesting because most of the people that I was working with, the other writers, were more literate in television than I was, because I really hadn't watched a tremendous amount of television. And, when I was in college, I got some jobs as an advertising copywriter, and
Mhm.
I didn't have a television. And so I remember going for this job, and they said, well, we don't know. You have these writing samples. I had writing samples from the college newspaper and from my first job in advertising, which was writing newspaper ads for a kind of upscale department store in Montreal called Holt Renfrew, which is sort of like, the the Bendels or something of Canada. And so I had those samples of writing, and they said, well, but could you write television commercials? And I said, well, yeah, I could try. They said, well, can you write us a sample one? So they had Jello pudding and pie filling they represented. So I wrote a commercial for Jello pudding and gave it to them, and it was basically the commercial that they had on the air.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so,
How, and how old were you then?
well, that was when I was like, what, 17, something like that,
That's
16, 17.
incredible.
And because I started college at 15, and
Oh my gosh.
skipped grades in school and all that. So, I guess I had already told them I didn't own a television. So they knew that I, was doing this spontaneously because I had never seen their commercial.
That's
And
fantastic.
so then I got a job working there at McKim, which became McKim Benton and Bowles in Toronto.
So now, did you start writing as a young child or as a teenager? What?
I was always reading, and then I was always writing. And I actually got like a little tiny printing press for, I don't know which birthday it was, maybe my 10th birthday or something like that. And yeah, because my brother was little, so it was probably my 10th birthday, and it was one of those presses, where you put the type in with tweezers and then you could roll it, and I I put out a newspaper called the Beats Home News.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I was writing as a kid, but I wasn't in a family that encouraged it that much. I was doing things like writing, changing the lyrics of music that I heard, or
That's
cutting
cool.
out pictures from magazines and writing satirical stories about my teachers, which once got caught by my French teacher and I got in a lot of trouble. But that's my story.
Well, well, when I was in high school, then I ended up um, I was, after my experience of being homeschooled, then going to the local public school, being quite unhappy there. My parents actually started a school that still exists in Millbrook.
Wow.
It used to be called the Dutchess County Day School, and I think now it's just called the Dutchess School because they have borders. Um, but they and some other parents got together and started a school. And so I went there, but it was tiny. It was like there were 3 kids in my class. And then there were more kids, as you went down to kindergarten, of course, because people were putting their kids into the school. So their classes were larger. The younger you went, the larger they were.
Yeah.
But I was in the like first class. So when I went there for fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, sixth and seventh grade. Yeah.
Now, when you were still young, is that when you got into James Thurber and Dorothy
Oh
Parker?
yeah, that was when I was reading James Thurber and reading the New Yorker and all that stuff.
Cartoon. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how did you end up McGill is such a great school. How did you end up at McGill? And you were only
Well,
15 or something?
Well, it was actually a horrible school for someone who was taking English. Great school if you want to be in pre-med.
Oh, okay.
But, it is kind of like the Harvard of Canada or whatever. But I, well, I skipped grades because after I had gone to this small private school in Millbrook, I was completing seventh grade. And then I was completing seventh grade. And then I went right from there into ninth grade in the school in Somers, in the public school. And that was sort of what my show Square Pegs was based on, that I was this 12-year-old in ninth grade.
That was a great show, by the way. Not everybody knows that you wrote Square Pegs and
Yeah,
also
wrote and
In the
produced.
World. Yeah.
And so that was my painful high school years. And I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. And meanwhile, my parents split up. My mother decided that she wanted to move back to Montreal. She was English Canadian from Montreal. And she decided that she wanted to move back there. And so she sort of engineered it that I was able to complete high school in 3 years. Because I had always been taking like an extra class instead of study hall. So I had a lot of credits. So I ended up finishing high school in 3 years and graduating at 15.
Jeez Wheeze. I was an English major in my undergrad, but my best English teacher was Mrs. Hamilton. I went to a girls' school in New Jersey, and Mrs.
Really? What was the name of it?
The Kimberly School for Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to dances at Choate and Lawrenceville and all that prep school stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this Mrs. Hamilton, the English class was so superior to anything I ever took when I was an English major in college. I was so gifted in that, to really.
Well, I just felt that I had to struggle to keep college English from ruining English literature for me.
Now, I also read, thank Wikipedia or someplace, that you got into the Jewish writers at that time.
I did. And then I got into my Jewish boyfriend and I converted to Judaism.
That's it. Who was your Jewish boyfriend?
He was a guy named Herbie Aronoff. And there was no secular marriage in Quebec. You had to be married by, a rabbi, or there was a Unitarian minister, I think, that married people. But other than that, you couldn't have a civil ceremony because the church had a big grip on the province of Quebec at that time, and the Catholic Church. And also his mother was, not accepting of a shiksa.
Of course.
So I went through the whole.
My favorite line is, I'm sorry, the shiksa's baking a apple pie.
Yes, right. I know that was the woman. Yes.
Was that your line?
No, it was hers. It was all her.
Okay.
It was a monologue that she created. But no. So anyway, so I also, as I said, I admired Jewish writers like Bruce J. Friedman and so on at the time, and later met him and he became a friend.
Wow.
Late Bruce J. Friedman. He was actually a great guy. But, so that was J.D. Salinger, all these people, so the Black humorists, as it were. And so I just felt like, okay, I want to belong to something, because I also had never been in any organized religion. Because my parents were very bohemian and, agnostic.
Right.
They both came from like a Church of England background, but they didn't really observe anything. Although we did celebrate holidays fanatically, like Christmas and Easter. So anyway, and my sister and I used to put on nativity plays where we'd make the dog be a donkey. And my sister would produce the baby Jesus from under her skirt, but her nightgown, really, because we had these white nightgowns that we used to wear. But so anyway, I did go through the whole conversion process, but I always say that I won the mother but lost the son because ultimately we did not stay together. But at the time when we were together, he got a job in Toronto, and that's why I wanted to go to Toronto and work in advertising.
But then you met somebody that helped you get to New York, or had you
Right.
met one of the Michaels that got you to New York, or?
Well, Michelle Chiquette got me to New York, but
Okay.
prior to that, I was in England.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because Herbie and I went, still unmarried, went to Europe and hitchhiked around. And we ended up back in London. I mean, we were in Paris. We were in Paris in '68, at the time of the Danny LaRouge and all that, the French, uh, Second French Revolution.
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
was.
But we ended up back in London, and then I got a job in advertising, and Herbie had got some different jobs, but he was not happy, and he decided he wanted to go back to Canada, and I did not want to go back to Canada. And so I said, well, I'm going to stay in London. And I did, and I worked in advertising there for a year, and was swinging London. My skirts were like blouses, really, my dresses.
Right, Mary Quant and all
Basically,
that.
see my underwear all the time.
And did you visit the West End very much, or were you kind of a struggling?
Well, I ended up getting into a relationship with an actor named Peter Kastner, who was there doing a film. He actually was in Francis Coppola's first movie that was his student film, which was called, what was it called? I think it was called You're a Big Boy Now. Anyway, so Peter Kastner, who was Canadian, and I met him in London where he was working on a called The Ugliest Girl in Town, a forerunner to that show, where they pretended to be girls in order to be in an apartment. And he, for some reason, was supposed to be pretending to be a girl.
We just had a Zoom loss. I lost.
Oh, all right. So anyway, he was in this TV show called The Ugliest Girl in Town that they were filming in England. And so we ended up in a relationship. And since he was making TV money, we went out to fancy restaurants and we went to see as many plays as possible. So I did actually get to see, I saw Hair, and I saw, I'm trying to remember different things, but like whatever was on, we would go and see.
I was living in Manhattan when Hair came out, so I saw it with Meatloaf in it.
Wow.
And then I got to see, this is about you, but I'll just share one more thing.
No, what?
I saw Equus, and it was Anthony Perkins. Burton was out,
good
and it was
Lord.
Anthony Perkins and Equus. It was so brilliant. And then I saw Chorus Line a lot.
Well, I never saw Chorus Line actually, but I remember seeing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead in London.
In London.
With Peter and various, we went to all different productions of things, and we went to the movies. We went to see Oliver. I remember it had just come out. Those big movies that they used to have that had an intermission.
Right. Great movies back then. Absolutely. Yeah. And the experimental films like Blow Up and all of that,
Right. Blow Up. Yes. So anyway, then Herbie came to visit and proposed to me again. And I decided that we went to Paris for the weekend or whatever. And, April in Paris, chestnuts in blossom. On the bank, and he proposed again. And I said, okay, and I'll come back to Montreal. And so I did. And then when I got back to Montreal and I was in the house that Herbie had been living in, I kept finding these long blonde hairs everywhere. And at the time, I was a brunette.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that he had been in a relationship with someone, which, sauce for the goose, but it was still kind of ongoing.
Oh.
And so he ended up breaking up with me and leaving me in Montreal with no job, no money, and nowhere to live. So that was difficult period.
I bet.
And when I first started psychotherapy, and so anyway, um, I lived in a succession of, borrowed apartments where I was cat sitting and that kind of thing for a while. And then finally, I ended up with a roommate who's still a friend of mine today. She's now living in New York. My friend Lita and I sharing an apartment. And that's when I got fixed up on a blind date by my former coworker, Sean Kelly, who wound up at the Lampoon. He fixed me up with Michelle Chacat. And Michelle and Sean were working together on things for this magazine that these two Harvard guys were starting in New York. And Michelle brought me to New York and to his 5-flight walk up on St. Mark's Place. It had a sign in the lobby that said, "Vomit outside, not in here."
Right.
Which had been written by the janitor. And so in a railroad flat was $75 a month.
Right.
When Michelle couldn't make the rent, he would pawn the television, which was a black and white television.
Right, of course.
Yes. And so that's how I came to the Lampoon.
And what a magazine that was. And you were one of the first women to work.
I was the first female contributing editor, and first and only at the time, because they could never have more than one at a time.
Oh, you're right. Well, the times have changed.
More than one at a time.
Now, I don't know if everybody in my listening audience, I was with a group of people recently who didn't know who Jerry Garcia was. So that's the danger of hanging out with young people. But yes. How would you describe National Lampoon? Because it was a favorite of mine during those years, that and Firesign Theater.
Oh, yeah, Firesign Theater. I remember listening to Firesign Theater with Michael O'Donoghue. Well, it was a boys, it was just a total boys, and it was white, mainly waspy, some Irish boys who, basically, I think Henry Beard and Doug Kenny thought that women were like a different species, like horses or something. Like, what do women eat? They didn't have any comprehension. And so it was also a magazine that was put out by a very small number of people. Like, most of the articles were written by the same, like, 5 or 6 people.
Right.
And, it was very incestuous.
It was very chauvinistic, misogynistic. Today we would say that.
Racist.
Did they pay you the same as they paid the men?
They paid me the same, but they didn't pay me, on a regular basis. In other words, I had to sell what I wrote to them. Huh. I didn't have a salary. I was a contributing editor, but I was paid by the piece. And it was very frustrating trying to get paid because you had to have a check request and had to be signed by Maddie and by the bookkeeper, Maddie Simmons. The guy who was the publisher. And, something was always, the other person who had to sign the check would be in the hospital with a broken wrist or something. It was just really hard to get money out of them. And I remember saying to Maddie once, could he sign my check request? And he was like, "Why do you need money? I just gave your boyfriend $1,000. So that would give you an idea of what the atmosphere was in terms of sexism. And
you were the editor.
Well, I was a contributing editor. I was a list of contributing editors who were people who were not actually on salary at the magazine. And the people who were on salary were only like Henry and Doug, Michael, Tony Hendra, PJ O'Rourke at one point, and Brian Konecki at one point.
And who else?
Kind of it. And then everyone else was just paid by the piece.
Okay. So there's a picture behind your screen right now.
Yeah, this is a picture.
Lampoon.
That is a picture of Saturday Night.
Oh, Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was Saturday Night Live winning our second Emmy.
Wow. What a great.
And
Well, I
you know,
recognize a lot of
they
faces. Yes, I
are.
recognize everybody now. Are you in that picture?
Yeah, I'm over behind Michael, the guy with the dark glasses. I'm behind that with my perm, you can see.
Oh, I love that perm. And is that Al Franken up
Al
there?
Franken is next to me with his own natural perm. And
Yes,
then
he
Tom
is.
Davis, and then Jim Downey, Alan Zweibel, Bill Murray, uh, Rosie Schuster is there.
Yep.
And then that's Tom Schiller, Michael O'Donoghue, and Marilyn Suzanne Miller.
It's beautiful. That was your first Emmy, huh?
No, that was our second Emmy.
Oh, second Emmy. Okay.
That
Well,
was our second Emmy.
I'll get a screenshot of that maybe.
Well, I could send you the picture if you want.
Oh, that would be nice. Oh, well, that was lovely. Thank you. So how long were you with Lampoon? And then because National Lampoon started making movies, were you still with them when they were doing that?
No,
No, or
well,
National
kind of.
Lampoon
Well, no,
Hour?
we weren't. What happened was I worked on the magazine for for about 4 years, I guess, and then Michael started. The Lemmings was happening, and it was a whole complicated thing with people with feuds and stuff. And Michael and Tony Hendra, who just passed away recently, were having a feud. And so Tony and Sean were doing Lemmings. And so in response, Maddie decided that Michael should do the radio hour.
Mm-hmm.
So he did the National Lampoon radio hour, and I worked on that because I was upset with my relationship with the magazine. I had asked Henry to lunch, and Henry Beard and I had lunch, and he said to me, I just don't think chicks are funny. So I should have like slapped him, but instead I cried and I lost my contact lens in this.
Oh, oh,
And
oh.
for the magazine again after that. So I worked on the radio hour because by then I had switched boyfriends in mid magazine and had hooked up with Michael O'Donoghue rather than Michelle.
Okay.
So and so Michael was running the radio hour, and I was living with him, so it was pretty easy for me to get him to do my stuff.
Right. And that's where Bill and Gilda were on
they were on
radio show. Yeah.
Yes, they were on the radio hour, and then what happened is that Michael and I left under there was a big hoo-ha, and Michael quit. And so then John Belushi, who had been doing bits on the radio hour, ended up taking over and running the radio hour.
And was he was more grounded back in those days? He was.
Oh yeah, he was. It was sort of pre-cocaine era. I think mostly people were just smoking a lot of grass, and Belushi was actually, he was. If you see the documentary on him, you'll realize that he was more of an intellect than people gave him credit.
Yes. Yes. And you were good friends with his wife as well, weren't you?
Well, I was good friends with him at that time, and he and Judy used to come over, and John would come over and visit us. And Judy was still working at the magazine. She was working in the art department at the magazine, because when Maddie wanted John to come from Chicago to be in Lemmings, he said, I need a job for my wife. So Maddie said, or for my girlfriend at that time, she was his girlfriend. Okay, and he hired her to be in the art department. So she was working. So in the afternoons when she was working, he would come over and drop in on us, and didn't talk much, but he would do impressions of people, which he was, of course, great at. Wow. And that was how that was our relationship with John, and he was very sweet, really, and friendly. And it was interesting because when we wanted Lorne to hire him for SNL, we were lobbying for Lorne. Michael and I were lobbying for Lorne to hire him. And he ended up, Lorne said, well, I don't know. I think he's trouble. And we were like, what? Belushi? He's a pussycat. Are you kidding? Trouble? He's no trouble. There you go. But anyway, so when we left the Lampoon, which you can hear the story of in the Lampoon documentary, but it was a big hoo-ha where I came in, was Easter Sunday. Bob Tischler and Michael were finishing up the radio hour to be sent out, and my desk had been given away. I had a desk there on that floor, and I came and I found that Michael Simmons, Maddie's son, had his stuff in my desk. And I got really upset, and I said, this is not right, and I want you to remove all my pieces from the radio hour, which would have meant they would have been there all night, right? So Michael was pissed off, and he called Maddie up at home, and they got into an argument, and Maddie said, you know, if your girlfriend doesn't like it, she can quit. And if you don't like it, you can quit too. And Michael said, I quit. And I was like, ah, because we had to pay a big $675 a month rent on our apartment. And I didn't know how we were going to do that. Quit.
Yeah. So how much time elapsed?
Said he brought home the bread and I brought home the rolls. So.
Well, so how much time elapsed before you were employed again?
A year.
A whole year.
Mm-hmm. Wow. A year.
So
a year of scrounging.
You were?
Yeah, scrounging and doing anything I could think of to make money, and writing for We Magazine, because another contributor to the Lampoon, Terry Catchpole, was an editor of We Magazine, and so he started giving me work, because I couldn't really, you know, go out and sell myself to Good Housekeeping or whatever on the basis of my Lampoon pieces.
Now, during that time, I was living in Manhattan too at the same time. Did you ever go to Max's Kansas City and those places?
Oh, yeah. We went to Max's. But Max's had sort of, by the time we went to Max's, I went to Max's, I think, first with Michelle, and then I did go to Max's with Michael. And I think we went and heard Patti Smith, actually. But we lived on 16th Street between 5th and 6th.
Yep, I know it well.
23 West 16th Street. And in a floor through brownstone for $675 a month.
Wow. Yeah, I lived right around the corner on Mercer Street at one point.
Right. So anyway, you know, so we were downtown people mainly.
CBGBs?
Yeah, CBGBs. I lost a scarf at CBGB's. I'll never forget. And also, you know, all of those places that were around there. And, you know, some of them are still there. Like, and actually, we sort of gave the McNally brothers a big boost, because when we started at Saturday night and people were looking for a place to go for the after party, we wanted to go to 1/5 because it was close to home.
Yep. I had my wedding.
Want to go uptown. So it turned out that everybody would go to 1/5, and 1/5 became very chic as a result.
Patti Smith lived upstairs, and that's where I had my wedding reception.
Patti Smith lived upstairs. Oh, 1/5. Yeah, it was delightful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Well, we actually I still have 2 chairs that came from the Coronial.
That's great. That's
and
wonderful.
An ice bucket.
Beautiful. An ice bucket.
Yes. I had them reupholstered, but I have them. So, yeah, one of those ice buckets with penguins on it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyway, after we left the Lampoon, then it was like, what are we going to do, kind of? And we did various weird things, like write this English version of a cartoon movie called Tarzoon, Shame of the Jungle.
Mm-hmm.
It was being done by a Belgian cartoonist named Pisha, who had also contributed to the Lampoon, and friends of his. And I like translated the script into English, and then we rewrote it, and then they translated it back into French. and apparently was a big hit in France, but I didn't care for it.
Mhm.
But we just did whatever we could do, and then Lorne Michaels came calling. But
Another
in the
Canadian.
meantime, I had
Sorry.
sold a book.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I
I
interrupted
had
you.
sold a book
Okay.
because my friend Deanne Stillman, who I met at a ladies' lunch, came and said, why don't we do a magazine, a women's humor magazine? And I said, well, I don't think we can really get the funds together to do a magazine, because you basically will have to be in the red for the first year, and we can't manage that. But what if we did a book? So that's how Titters, the first collection of humor by women, came to be. And so we had just sold this book. So ultimately when Lorne offered me the job on SNL, I turned it down and said I couldn't do it because I was doing a book. And he just basically lied to me and said, oh, you can do the book in your spare time. And, what spare time? You never had any spare time. But so he, and then a friend of mine who was also involved with the book and it helped us sell the book said, it's an offer you can't refuse and you have to do this. And luckily I said, yes. Okay.
But I want to say Titters is a great book. Is this still available on Amazon?
I think it might be available on eBay.
eBay, okay. Great book. Of course I had it.
We did that. And then we later did Titters 101, which was a literary version where we did parodies of various people like Emily Dickinson and so on.
Right.
But so anyway, so that first year of SNL, I was basically stretched very, very thin.
Was it anything like Tina Fey's show 30 Rock? Did you relate to that at all or not?
It wasn't really.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the sort of writer's room part of 30 Rock was accurate to it. But, more about the personal lives than it was about how the show actually got put on. It never really showed you any of the show. It would show you snippets.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the sort of craziness and pressure of 30 Rock was accurate, but basically it was like we were given this great sandbox to play in, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
And that was the fun of it. I mean, the real fun of it was saying, okay, I need a kitchen set, and then there would be a kitchen. It was like grown up play in a way.
Oh, that's so much fun.
Although it was really hard work. But I mean, what was great about it was that you could bring your visions to life, as it were.
So did you actually work all night sometimes? And always. So what days would you start? I mean, how would you have a break?
I mean, at first we came in more in the afternoon. Then we started coming in later and later on Mondays, and come in on Mondays. And initially there was a thing on Mondays where people would come in and watch the show from the Saturday before. But that didn't keep going, I guess, because people got VCRs and they didn't need to do that, because this was before VCRs when it started.
Yeah.
But we would have a writer's meeting with Lorne and usually with the host on Monday night, and then pitch ideas. And Lorne would put little cards up on his board. And and then we would go out and eat. And then we would come back on Tuesday, sometime in the afternoon, and start writing. And we would basically be up all night Tuesdays.
And you'd be writing as a group? I mean, you'd just be pitching ideas?
No, we wouldn't be writing as a group. I mean, it changed, I think, where there came to be group rewrites and stuff. But when we initially were doing it, it was sort of every man for himself or woman for himself. And what would happen would you would collaborate with some people on different things. Like Danny and I wrote those Irwin Mainway sketches like you know, unsafe Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
Or unsafe.
A bag of glass.
Bag of glass. That was Christmas toys. And it was a bag of glass. It was just a big bag. Kids love it. They love it. And so Dan and I wrote those together. But mainly I worked with Rosie Schuster because we sort of banded together for protection in a way.
Yeah.
And I ended up forming a writing partnership with her that produced, I think, some of the better stuff that we did, like Uncle Roy, which you never see anymore.
Right, of course not.
And
Buck Henry?
Yes, with Buck Henry, the late Buck Henry. And the Nerds pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Like Bill and Gilda.
Gilda. Oh, yeah.
And that arose out of, well, it arose out of my seeing Elvis Costello and saying it wasn't punk rock, it was nerd rock, because, you know, it had the high water pants and
right
all that. And so we did a piece, nerd rock, and we wanted it to be John and Gilda, and Bill was going to play his DJ character, and John wouldn't do it. So we slotted Bill in instead, and then Danny played the DJ. And it was, you know, just a stroke of luck because Gilda and Bill fell into those roles perfectly.
And I think I read somewhere they were a couple at one point. Wasn't she in love with him
for a long time, on and off? They were a couple. Yeah. And Bill used to call Gilda like and leave a message saying that Todd called.
So
they really identified with those parts, you know, which was sort of a microcosm of their relationship, a little bit sadomasochistic.
Yeah.
Because Bill had this longtime girlfriend who he ended up marrying and then divorcing. But he had this longtime girlfriend that was sort of always in the background, and you know, she would show up at the show and things like that, and Gilda would be all upset. But you could always tell if they were together or not together, because in the read through, if they were together, Gilda would laugh especially loudly at Bill's stuff. And then you knew they were back on, but that went on forever.
So what a beautiful spirit. A friend of mine had a birthday. We were donating to Gilda's Club, which is such a wonderful organization.
Right, yes.
Just, you know, throwing herself against the wall. I mean, everything she did.
Yeah, she did. And she would do anything for a laugh, basically. Yeah. And I mean, I remember that she said once that, you know, it's like comedy is when you fall on the ice and try to make it look like you did it on purpose.
So the very first show of Saturday Night Live, wasn't that George Carlin, or am I wrong?
It was George Carlin, and it was a big controversy with George Carlin because the network wanted him to cut his hair.
Wow, they did.
They want him to cut his hair and wear a suit. And the compromise that was achieved was that he put his hair back, like a man ponytail, and he wore a suit jacket over a t-shirt.
I bet he was fun. I just imagine him being fun.
Well, I don't know. I didn't really have much contact with him, but I just remember all of that going on, the arguing about that being a crisis.
So how many years were you with him?
On Saturday night? Yeah. 5 years.
Wow. Those are the golden years, in my opinion. I mean, I actually, sometimes I give workshops on different aspects of mental health, and I frequently show clips from Saturday Night Live.
Really?
There's no copyright involved. Don't tell anybody I did that, Anne, okay?
No. I would never.
I would talk about therapists, you know, how therapists are portrayed in the movies. And I would show that Elliot Gould clip where John is playing the Godfather.
Oh, that one. And what about the other one where Gilda is a child psychiatrist?
I don't know if I've seen that.
You've never seen that?
No.
I don't know if they show it because Gilda plays sort of an autistic character and Lorraine is a child psychiatrist, because who better can understand the mind of a child than another child? So because Lorraine and I came up with this. Rosie and I wrote the piece, but Lorraine and I came up with it because she had this character that she used to do, which is sort of like a Shirley Temple-ish character that she did.
Yeah.
And I thought, what could we do with this character? It would be fun to put her in the role of a sort of authority figure where she's, you know, laying down the truth or whatever to people. And so it ended up being on the Kate Jackson show, and Kate and Bill were the parents. And then Gilda was like her Colleen character, which was basically an autistic girl. And she just went like, and she didn't talk at all. And and when Lorraine asked her to bring her something to represent herself, she brought her a stapler.
I don't know if it's politically correct to laugh at that still, but I work with kids on the spectrum, so I'm laughing.
Well, I mean, it was very funny. And then Lorraine was on the desk, and then she's sort of sitting cross-legged on the top of her desk. And then at one point after they say, "Oh, thank you, doctor, you've made a breakthrough," or whatever, and they leave. And Gilda, bangs into the wall. And and they leave, and then Lorraine is like pressing a button and saying, to her assistant, Miss Stevens or whatever it was, "I need to go to the potty. I need to go potty right now. It's coming out."
Well, that's before the PC police tightened everything
right
up.
So I don't know if they show that. They don't show that anymore, and they don't show Uncle Roy. And we also did a piece with the Colleen character where it was Christina Crawford's Christmas, and she played Christina Crawford, and Jane played Joan Crawford.
See, I find that stuff funny still, but
well, why not? It is funny. I mean, the thing is,
funny.
Michael O'Donoghue was sort of a mentor to me, and he used to say, "If you can't laugh at death, what can you laugh at?"
Exactly.
So it was sort of the feeling that nothing was sacred and nothing was out of bounds to do.
Now, do you think that the way that Garrett
Which was also the Lampoon had that same attitude.
You need to be able to laugh about everything. That's where gallows humor comes from anyway, from
right, exactly. And I've always felt that nothing is sacred. I remember the Lampoon issue, "Is Nothing Sacred?" There was an "Is Nothing Sacred" issue, and it was the Che Guevara poster, but with a pie. And I did a piece for that, which was about the noble savage, and it was sort of a mockery of the worship of Native Americans. And actually, I got a call from people at the Smithsonian who wanted to know if Ann Beatts was a pseudonym, because they thought that it had been written by somebody who was in that field, because the research was very accurate.
That's great. I love that story. That's wonderful.
But, I've always felt that, you can take on any target. And Paul Krasner, another person that I always admired, the editor of The Realist, said that, the humorous job is to point out that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes.
Right. Absolutely.
But there you are. So why, where
Absolutely.
I mean, not that I particularly want humor to be hurtful, but I feel like that you should be able to, if you, the main thing is, if you're going to take on suspect targets like that, you need to do it well.
Right. Well, I think
that's the difference.
Yeah. I remember when the show first came on, I was actually living on like 21st Street and going to a neighborhood bar and talking about the show the next day, and sometimes staying there and watching.
That was a cool thing, when you would, if you managed to get out of the house, on Sundays, you would hear people in the next booth, talking about what you had done. And that was very satisfying, because other than working on a daily newspaper, you don't really get that kind of opportunity in show business to have that instantaneous reaction.
So wonderful. So wonderful. And at the bar I used to hang out with, it was an Irish bar where they threw a lot of darts. And I don't know if you remember those kind of bars, or
Yes.
beers and shots and darts. And one of the fellows was a tech on the show, and I was always too scared to say, "Could I get a pass
Oh, could you
somehow?"
come? Could
And
you get tickets? Yeah.
yeah, I can't take it somehow. So I always kick myself for that. But it's been part of my life. I mean, for such a and so
Well, I
part of
think
so
for
many
a lot of
a lot of
people,
people.
it was something that they grew up with or had as integrated into their lives, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
so
still run across that, you know, that people, I remember I met somebody who said that he used to go around with friends and perform in his middle school, used to perform sketches like before they had the start of school. They would go to classrooms and do sketches from Saturday Night Live,
yeah.
including Fred Garvin, male prostitute, which I thought was really bizarre. Like, what middle school? What middle school did he go to? But apparently they did that. Of course, when he told me that, it just made me feel really old.
No. So at some point in time, you had a baby, or you adopted a child, rather. You adopted it?
I did
No?
not have a baby. I tried to have a baby. I tried. I mean, I'd always thought that I would have kids or a kid, and I and I, you know, I thought I would end up with somebody and I would have a kid, right? But then, as I was in my late 30s, I realized that this was not happening. So I went through fertility stuff for 5 years.
Wow.
And I used up all my Writers Guild insurance, which was very generous towards that at the time. And I ended up, you know, where I had to give myself like shots,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which I thought I could never do. But by the end, I was able to like sort of, you know, be like giving myself a shot in the butt and going, hold on a second. Luckily, I was never that good at giving shots or was afraid of needles when I was in the drug world because I never got involved with anything that had required needles. But you know, afterwards when I was doing fertility stuff, I was like, okay, fine, I'll be able, you know, I could do it in a gas station restroom. But I went through like a not in vitro, but where they they actually use these words, they harvest your eggs
Right,
and
right.
then they
Yeah.
put them back into your fallopian tubes and hope that they'll like have a party in your pants. But nothing happened. So I had to kind of give up at that point. So then I took a few years to mourn the fact that I was not going to be able to have a child. And I ended up on the adoption route and I adopted out of foster care.
Good for
So
you.
that took a while. I mean, about probably the same length of time as it would take if you were trying to adopt from China or someplace like that. Because I had to take lessons,
Hmm.
none of which were extremely useful.
Right, exactly.
But I did like 40 hours of, you know, training. And then you had to basically open up your life and have everything examined to qualify. And then once I was established that I could be a foster parent, I was waiting for a kid. And that took a while and a few missteps along the way where they would like they would say, oh, there's this kid, and then the grandmother would show up, or oh, this is
Right,
kid, and would turn
right.
out that she had shunt in her head, which I did not want. And I just said, I want a girl. And I birthed to 3. And I don't care about the rest of it, you know, what color or whatever they are. And I ended up with my daughter, who's wonderful, and you know, we're a great match. Actually, I mean, we've been quarantined together for a year, so the
Wow.
fact that we haven't killed each other during that time,
That
given that
says
she's a
something.
teenager,
Yeah. That's
is
how old is
quite
she now?
something.
How old is she now?
She's 18.
18. Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
she's
That's
like 18 and
wonderful.
a half, and she's half African American and half Mexican American.
Which must be
And
beautiful.
actually, we found out, we did that 23andMe thing. We found out that she has a teeny bit Jewish and a teeny bit Filipino, which pleased my Filipino. I have Filipino relatives. They were very pleased. And it's like a tiny percent. And that she's also quite a bit Native American.
Well, I'm sure she's
helpful
beautiful.
with college entry.
I bet it was. I bet it was. Well,
yeah, because we definitely stress that.
Has she hasn't been to college yet, though, or did she start and have to stop?
She did one term of it, and then she decided to take a term off. And now she's going back in March because it was very hard for her. It was very hard for her to just do Zoom classes where there's 350 people.
Yeah.
And, you know, just adjusting to that. And it was not what she had hoped. And I think she was very disappointed. And so it was very difficult. So now she's going to have to go back into that. But hopefully then, you know, things will open up maybe by the fall.
Now, coming full circle,
a real college experience, you know.
Yeah, I love mine. Drug, sex, and rock and roll. But you know, that was
exactly. She's missing out on all of that because, you know, she's just isolated.
So coming full circle to college and your teaching, do you have to be enrolled at that college to take your classes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
not in the summer. You can take the summer class, I think, without being enrolled. But in the regular term, you have to be enrolled. Yeah.
Now, I met you through Sean Mulville's film Act Social, and was about improvisational comedy. But I didn't quite know how you actually fit in because you don't have.
Well, I don't really, because I've never been. I mean, Sean, I had Sean in one of my private classes, which I was doing before I started teaching at Chapman, or actually I was teaching at USC. But before that, I was teaching just privately, and I would advertise, and I said it was Saturday Night Live and 5 easy lessons, and someone said, "Well, you lied about the easy." But I would teach classes where I got people to come and, you know, pay me, and then we would do like 5 weeks of classes and put on a show at the end. And so Sean was part of that. So that's how I met him originally. And so he was like my student, right? I have not really spent time in the world of improv because everything that we did on SNL was writing based. I mean, it might have started in improv, like for instance, Lorraine having this character that she did, the little girl character. But then, you know, once we ran with it, it was all written down. And well, so many otherwise, I mean,
right. But
you know, so many of them think that Saturday Night Live could be made up as it went along, but no, because then the camera would have been in the wrong place, you know?
Right, exactly. But so many of them were improvisers from Second City, Toronto, and Second City, Chicago. So they really came from there.
That's what made them so great. I mean, that they were so great and that they were able to handle so many different things because they had the improv background. But it was, you know, sketches could arise out of improvisation. But then once you had that, you know, then you had to make sure that it was written down and pretty much, you know, set in stone, because you had to camera block it.
Right, exactly. So I think
when people started throwing in lines, they wouldn't be on camera.
Right.
You know.
Right. Now you need those little blue tape on the floor.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that makes it more rigid and doesn't it all, you know, it was more of a writer's medium.
So you
that was what was different about it.
I'm sorry. Do you still write every day? Are you a daily writer, or what's your practice like now?
It's not good. Because I'm not really writing. And I feel the pressure of it. Because I would like to, I started working on a book, but I haven't really gotten that far with it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I put a lot of my creativity into my classes, which is satisfying in a way, but it's their work, not my work in the end. But I do have a couple of projects with a friend and writing partner. Eve Branstein and I are actually hoping to sell a show about the early days of the Lampoon called Funny Boys.
That would be great. That would be great.
Sort of, I always say it's like a little bit, it's on Madison Avenue, but it's to the left of Mad Men.
Okay. Now, I thought, for some reason, I thought that the first office was down in the, not even in Soho, down in the Wall Street area that was full of lofts at one point.
Well, there were these guys that worked on the art direction that had a loft that was downtown. But the offices of the Lampoon were in the same office as the Weight Watchers office, which is where Maddie Simmons was operating out of, and they were in the Vision building on Madison Avenue and 58th Street.
That's funny. That's funny because
and it was called the Vision building because it was in the middle of what was the eyeglass district.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny because I remember seeing
a lot of optometrists and stuff around there at that time. Anyway,
yeah.
Now probably not, but then.
Well, I remember
it was in the garment district and the diamond district and so on.
My first husband and I almost bought a loft right near where that Lampoon office was because I remember going by and saying, "Oh, this is going to be a fun neighborhood." But
but I mean, and then a friend of mine, Kenny Nightel, had a loft on what was it, Lexington and 22nd or something like that. That we did, that he did a lot of artwork for the magazine and so on. But where the hangout place was on Madison Avenue.
In the Vision.
I used to be there late at night, and I used to go home by myself in the subway to St. Mark's Place, and I can remember walking on down to St. Mark's Place and people going, like Reds,
Oh yeah. So
offering you drugs, But one thing about it is I felt sort of safe there rather than when I was going on those long, lonely blocks down to the 6, because there were always people around at any hour of the day or night.
I need to ask you a question. A good friend of mine who actually worked with Jim Hansen on the Muppets lived on St. Mark's Place. And across the street from her was a flower dealer. Do you remember the flower dealer on St. Mark's Place? It was
I don't remember the flower dealer, but I remember the pizza place on the corner where I used to get slices for like 25 cents. And
Electric Circus was on that block too.
Yes, Electric Circus, and Michael O'Donoghue had worked at the Electric Circus, but we were at 30 St. Mark's on the opposite side of the street, and I think Abby Hoffman had lived at 28.
Yeah.
And there were also the men's baths.
Right. Yeah.
Were there.
So a different time, a different era.
Yeah.
But listen, I love talking. I could just talk to you forever.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we've taken up a lot of your time.
Well, you gave me a lot of your time, Anne. I'm so grateful, and eventually I'd love to take a class with you because I know I'd learn a lot. I write here and there, mostly there, occasionally here. But you really are a national treasure, and I'm so appreciative, and I hope we can stay in touch. And
absolutely.
And I just thank you again.
I left my phone number for you. You have my email, and I also, when I left you a phone message, I left you my phone number, so you have my phone number also.
Wonderful.
So let's stay in touch, and I hope this is useful to you for your podcast. Seems like it was a bit rambly, but anyway.
Oh, it's fantastic for my podcast. Thank you again, and I'll be talking to you soon. You're my kind of woman.
And where are you exactly?
I'm sorry. I'm in Naples, Florida.
Oh, really? Huh?
Yes. Republican land, but
do you miss New York?
Desperately. The city.
You do?
Desperately. Oh, yeah. I've been here
I miss
37
it
years.
from time to time a lot,
Yeah.
especially in the spring and fall.
Yeah. Oh,
But it's so expensive. I feel like it's so expensive to live there now. It would just
you
be
have
real
to be a
hard.
bazillionaire. You have to be
Yeah,
really rich to live in
yeah,
Manhattan.
yeah.
So
You know, it's not the same old funky New York that it used to be.
no, it's not, is it? And once they
No.
started putting those Nike stores and
Oh
M&Ms, and
yeah, no, I
they
know
cleaned
it's
up Times
not. I mean,
Square.
I
Yeah.
liked it during the period where they said, you know, Prez to city, drop dead. I have a scarf, you know, one of those designer scarves, and it has headlines from the New York Post on it, and it has um, headless body found in topless bar. It's a great New York Post headline.
Well, we'll
I
have,
like those days. I
I
like
did
the
too.
dirty funkiness of it.
Absolutely. So
Times Square was Times Square, you know, and when there were all these weird little pockets of things like luncheonettes and little places that were shoe repair places and all this kind of stuff, like real life things that seem to mostly have vanished.
yeah, they have. Anyway, well, we'll talk more about the city next time I talk to you. All
Okay,
right.
great. All
Okay.
right. Take
Take care
care.
and
All
have a
right.
great day.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. You were great. Thank you.